What's going on, guys? Welcome back to this week's second exclusive segment from the greatest podcast on turf. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Anthony.
And for this exclusive segment, we are going to be doing our weekly stardom, sit-em lineups. Looking at guys that got good matchups, bad matchups. Looking at guys that are going to get the start and, do you good. Be sure to check out our other content this week. We did our recap of what happened last week. We did our waiver wire episode. Also, some trades that you should look out for. So those guys might still be available. Trade deadline is 2 days after this video, so be sure to check that out. We also have coming up, we have our best bets episode, so be sure to check that out, and our podcast where we are doing our pick'em series. I still have a pretty commanding lead, but we'll see if Anthony can try to catch up.
I'm trying, kind of starting to. I think I'm like 11 games behind you in the series. My back is really itchy. But yeah, with that being said, don't forget to like the video, subscribe if you're new to the channel. 300 subscriber giveaway. We're giving away a signed Todd Gurley jersey from the Rams, 100% authentic, certificate and all. We are giving that away at 300 subscribers, so be sure to subscribe to the channel. We also got merch coming soon. Been talking to this one guy we're thinking of getting the merch from. Talks are getting serious. Bunch of other different merch coming soon too as well, so be on the lookout for that. And before we get into it, speaking of merch, here's a word from our sponsor.
Little Italy Pizzeria. They got the best cheesesteaks, the best pizza in all of Delaware. 2 locations. One is in Middletown, Delaware. The other one is in Townsend. Great people, great food, great prices. Be sure to let them know that the greatest podcast on turf sent you. They will hook you up with a discount. Also, if you show proof that you are subscribed, they will hook you up with an even bigger discount. So be sure to check it out. Get yourself some cheaper food. It's good food. Trust me. Check it out.
Yeah, cheapest prices around. There's not anywhere in Delaware that can hold us if we beg them to when it comes to prices. I mean, you can compare, but you're not going to find better prices than Little Italy. So check out my family's business, show them some love, enjoy a discount off your food, and stardom. My stardom quarterback this week, we got Sleepy Joe Burrow going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, just to make it easier when I'm editing, the Bengals are traveling to the Raiders. But I'm starting Joe Burrow this week. The Bengals are coming off a bye. They just got blown out by the Browns the week before their bye. So they're going to be playing pissed off. Joe Burrow's been doing his thing. He's been making a case for comeback player of the year coming back from his injury. The Bengals got lucky because their whole division lost last week. The division's still totally up for grabs after the Bengals having that absolutely brutal loss to the Browns. So the Bengals are going to be coming off this bye week, prepared to play the Raiders, who just lost Henry Ruggs, who just lost Damon Arnett. The Raiders are coming back down to earth to be the Raiders. So that's a good sign for the Bengals coming off the bye pissed off. So if you have Joe Burrow, if he's available on the waiver wire, like he is in some leagues that I'm in anyway. I can only speak for the ones I'm in, but he's in the waiver wire for 1 or 2 of the 4 leagues I'm in. So if he's available, go ahead, pick him up and start him this week. He's a must start, and he's definitely a weekly winner going against the Raiders defense that just got embarrassed the past couple weeks by the Giants and the Chiefs.
My quarterback start for this week, it is Tua traveling to play the New York Jets in New Jersey. They're in New Jersey.
It's like northern Jersey. It's MetLife. It's like right on the border.
Traveling to New Jersey to play the New York Jets. Tua has been a pretty solid option so far in fantasy football. Will Fuller might be playing. I would lean on the side of caution, but he might be playing. He still has his boy Jalen Waddle. He still can make things work on the offense. Last week, he only played about 45% of snaps, and he still put up 12 fantasy points for you. And that was against a rough Baltimore defense. Tua only played half the snaps because he had a jacked up hand, finger, whatever that was. But when he came in, he did pretty solid. He had 12 fantasy points, and he did end up getting a rushing touchdown. The weeks before that, he played Buffalo. He did okay, 15 against Buffalo. That's not bad. And then the 2 weeks before, he had cleared 25 points. Tua has been a pretty solid quarterback so far. He does have rushing upside, and he's going up against a Jets team that allows, I think, 30 points over the last 4 games. 120 points over the last 4 games. That's a lot of points, and I think that Tua can have a pretty decent, solid day against this Jets team. He is a decent streaming quarterback. Most likely he will be available in your league, so be sure to check him out.
Yeah, which leads me, did you only have one starting quarterback this week?
Yes.
Which leads me to my sit-em quarterback. This one maybe is a surprise. I'm pretty sure he was on our stardoms last week, and that is Carson Wentz going up against the Buffalo Bills. It's going to be cold, pushing 30s and 40s in his weather. Bills have a very good defense. We all know how Carson Wentz plays under pressure. He just tries to do too much, and he gets absolutely embarrassed. He tries it, and he does stupid shit, which ends up hurting him in the long run. So I'm going to sit Carson Wentz this week, traveling to Buffalo, who's trying to gain some momentum in the AFC, and who has a very good defense and can completely neutralize Carson Wentz and shut him down. Yeah, Carson Wentz used to play in Philly in the cold, but that don't change what he does against good defenses and good pressure. He's not very good. Sit Carson Wentz this week. There's probably other options available, such as Joe Burrow on the waivers, Tua on the waivers. There's got to be better options than Carson Wentz this week.
My quarterback sit-up for this week, it is Kirk Cousins, and he is, I believe, he is home against Green Bay. Kirk Cousins, he has been decent so far in fantasy. The last 2 games, he has had 20 points. But I don't really trust him against Green Bay. Green Bay they've been decent defensively so far. Not bad, kind of respectable. Last week against Seattle, they absolutely held him to 0 points. Granted, Russell Wilson was coming off of an injury. He looked sloppy. We saw the same thing happen with Dak Prescott when he came back. Got destroyed by the Broncos. And obviously the Seahawks didn't have much success either. But Kirk Cousins doesn't have great success against Green Bay historically.
Nope. So
I would be looking to possibly sitting Kirk Cousins this week. Another guy that you probably want to sit is Matt Ryan going up against the Patriots. It might be a revenge game in theory because of what happened in the Super Bowl. He should, in theory, be kind of pissed off. But Matt Ryan doesn't really have any weapons. Just Kyle Pitts coming off of a huge blowout loss to the Dallas Cowboys. So I would kind of look to sit Matt Ryan.
I don't remember the last time the Patriots lost to the Falcons. Because I know the year after we played in the Super Bowl, we beat them in the regular season. Because Julio absolutely embarrassed Malcolm Butler and literally, it was like a movie, like a goal line fade. Julio literally just stood straight up with his hands up. Malcolm Butler jumped up and Julio caught it and just ripped it back, and Malcolm Butler went flying back. It was pretty good. But yeah, the Falcons haven't beat us since probably, I want to say before the Super Bowl, honestly, before the 28-3 Super Bowl. But yeah, the Falcons suck. More of the story. Sit Matt Ryan as well. For my stardom running back, speaking of the Patriots, I'll tell you right now, the Patriots are traveling to the Atlanta Falcons tonight. So what I'm going to say is you're going to start Damian Harris, obviously. Zeke and Tony Pollard just absolutely ran all over the Falcons defense. But if Damian Harris doesn't play, or maybe even if he does play, if you're in a deep league, start Ramondre Stevenson. Ramondre Stevenson, I'm pretty sure, I would like to think, and as most people would think, he ran himself into a timeshare last week. He probably will see more reps than Brandon Bolden, who has been seeing a lot of the running back 2 reps after last week's game. But with the Patriots, you never know. But I will say this, Damian Harris is a must-start if he's healthy. But if Damian Harris does not play again because he's still coming back from his concussion off a short week, start Ramondre Stevenson. They're touted to have a big day. The Patriots O-line played out of their mind. They've been playing out of their mind. And the Falcons are terrible. So go ahead and start the Patriots running backs this week that they're not named Brandon Bolden and J.J. Taylor.
My first running back start this week, and this is kind of obvious, but it is A.J. Dillon going up against the Minnesota Vikings. If you have A.J. Dillon and you're believing that he is just a backup running back and you don't want to start him, that is not the case. A.J. Dillon is very good at football. I think that the Packers probably won't really miss a beat having him in the offense. He's not as explosive as Aaron Jones, but he is the closest guy to Derrick Henry in football, a lot of people say. My man is built. He is a very good running back last week. He was very solid against the Seattle Seahawks, putting up 26 fantasy points, 2 touchdowns. The dude's a monster. He's going to continue to get the ball a ton against the Minnesota Vikings defense. That isn't very good. I can see the Packers beating up on Minnesota, kind of, in my opinion. So A.J. Dillon is a solid start. He is a top 10 running back in fantasy for the weeks that Aaron Jones is out. And definitely hold him on your team.
Yeah. Moving on to my second stardom running back, we got James Conner, who is traveling to Seattle. Pretty much A.J. Dillon just ran all over the Seahawks. The Seahawks defense is not very good. I would like to think that James Conner is a little better right now than A.J. Dillon, at least a little bit. The Cardinals are coming off of a very bad blowout loss to the Carolina Panthers, where James Conner still did his thing, honestly. I mean, let me find the numbers. I just had him up on my phone. Jesus. Yeah, James Conner he still scored 15 PPR fantasy points in a blowout. 10 carries, 4 targets. He had about 30 yards receiving. He had a touchdown. I mean, James Conner, he's kind of been the do-it-all back since Chase Edmonds left. I'm pretty sure Benjamin is the backup, but he's not making noise. James Conner's been catching the ball. He's been seeing a bulk of the carries. And they're playing in Seattle this week where it is going to be cold. Kyler's coming off injury. D-Hop's coming off injury, so I'm sure they'll try and come out of this one passive. It is a division game. So, I mean, they're probably going to try and get the run game going early. So, if you have James Conner, start him this week at Seattle. You will not regret it. James Conner this week, he's another must-start.
My next stardom running back, it is Mark Ingram traveling to Philly. Philly has been pretty bad so far against running backs, and Mark Ingram, I think, would do solid against them. If Kamara does play, Mark Ingram obviously takes a step back, but if you're in a real deep league, you might be able to squeeze him in a flex play type of deal. Because he is still there in PPR terms. He's still a pretty good receiving back for him. The first game when he was back and Kamara was playing, he did have 5 receptions. Last game when Kamara wasn't playing, he had 4. So he's decent in PPR. Last game when Kamara didn't play at all, he still put up 19 fantasy points, which is pretty solid against a Tennessee defense that is way better than the Ravens. Granted, he didn't do that good on the ground. He had about 3.7 or so yards a carry, which isn't the greatest, but I think he can do decent against his Philly defense. And the next stardom running back that I have, it is Dearness Johnson. I'm just kind of sprinkling him in there. If Nick Chubb plays or doesn't play, I could see Dearness Johnson being a decent starter. I would say if Nick Chubb plays, you can throw him in a flex. But if he doesn't play, he's obviously a starter, top 10 running back. He's put up about 25 points every time that Nick Chubb isn't there. So like I said, if you're struggling and Nick Chubb does decide to play, I wouldn't blame you for throwing in Johnson, especially against the Detroit Lions team in a game that looks like it could be a blowout.
Yeah, which we're going to move on to games that in theory could be a blowout. For my start on my receivers, we got the Ravens traveling to the
sit them running backs.
Oh. Whoops, I'm going back to old school. Well, before we get into the wide receivers, our sit-em running backs this week are the Buffalo Bills running backs. That means Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. If you're in a truly, truly deep league and you have to start Matt Breida, that is a goddamn shame. But yeah, we're sitting all the Bills running backs for fantasy football. They have a very hard schedule. I said it on Monday's video. Now my phone was tacked up. The Buffalo Bills schedule for running backs coming up. Colts this week, Saints next week, Patriots, Buccaneers, Panthers, Patriots, Atlanta. That's a hard schedule, and their running back room is just way too much of a liability, especially from what we saw against the Jets. They had all 3 running backs touch the end zone, and there was a pretty even split of carries and receptions between them. Yeah, maybe because Zach Moss was coming off of a concussion, but I still don't trust it. They have a hard schedule, and it's just way too much of a liability. So if you have the Bills running backs, I probably wouldn't start them, especially against the Colts defense this week that has been pretty solid against the run. Yeah, James Robinson had an okay game. He got in the end zone once, and he had a couple of receptions, but the Colts defense is pretty well-rounded, so go ahead and sit the Buffalo Bills running backs and probably until further notice, unless they just hit the ground running and run through all these tough run defenses that they're about to play.
My first sit-em running back this week, it is Mike Davis playing against the New England Patriots.
Yep.
It looks like Cordell Patterson has a solid chance to play. He's practiced all week. Surprisingly, I didn't think he was going to have a shot to play, but like I said, he's practiced all week, and there is a chance that he plays Thursday night. Even if he does not play, Mike Davis is still not a good option against this Patriots defense that is solid. Not only that, Wayne Gallman is the guy in Atlanta if Cordell Patterson is out. When Cordell Patterson was out last week, Wayne Gallman stepped in and he was the lead back. Mike Davis has been one of the worst running backs in football so far this season. In terms of yards per scrimmage, he's only getting about 4 yards a scrimmage. That's bottom 3. It's not very good. He's not doing good at all. Do not start him against this Patriots defense.
Done a lot of stupid shit. I drafted Mike Davis in fantasy football and I messed up on the video. Which, speaking of sucks, the Eagles running backs are also sits this week against the New Orleans Saints. The Saints have been pretty good against the run. The Eagles still don't have a consistent running back room, really. Yeah, Jordan Howard is the running back one, but also, yeah, Boston Scott's getting touches, and yeah, Kenneth Gainwell still gets sprinkled in there every now and then. What was I about to look at? And last week, the Saints defense only gave up 30 rushing yards to Dante Foreman, who, I mean, yeah, that's not expected. They're not all that in a bag of chips. He's not all that. And Adrian Peterson the Saints only gave up 50 rushing yards last week to a running back room that's about the pretty same level as the Eagles, in my opinion. Yeah, the Eagles may have a little bit better of an offensive line, maybe, but still, the Eagles suck. The running backs suck, and the Saints defense is pretty good against the run. So if you have the starting Eagles running back this week, again, I'm sorry. But if there's other options out there, which there probably isn't because how deep we are into fantasy, don't start the Eagles running backs. The Saints are good against the run. I'm pretty sure the Saints are bottom 5 in run against the run, so that's pretty good. So go ahead and sit the Eagles running backs this week.
My next set of running back this week is Antonio Gibson going up against the Panthers. The Panthers are 4th hardest against the run, and Antonio Gibson hasn't been good so far all year in fantasy. I know last week that he did pretty good in terms of fantasy points, but half of those points were 2 touchdowns, and I don't think he's going to do that against this Carolina Panthers defense. The Panthers defense is solid. Antonio Gibson isn't that good. He is not the pass catcher on this offense. I've been trying to say trade him for a long time. You need to trade him. Get him off your team. I wouldn't feel confident starting any Washington player this week.
It's kind of hard to trade him when we're in the same fantasy leagues, and a lot of the guys in there watch our videos. So you saying trade Antonio Gibson, it's not helping my case.
Fair.
So that's why I haven't traded him yet.
It's fair.
Because nobody will bite.
It's fair.
Thanks. But now, moving on to our stardom wide receivers. As I was saying before I effed up, the Ravens wide receivers, and by that I mean Rashad Bateman and Hollywood Brown. Between the two of them, they had 21 targets last week. That's pretty good. Hollywood had 13, and I'm pretty sure Bateman had 8. They kind of just caught Miami on a good night, I guess, and they couldn't figure out how to stop the mid-blitz play on Madden. It's pretty much all they were running was mid-blitz. But yeah, I'm sure the Ravens are going to come pissed off this week. They're playing in Chicago. Chicago is coming off their bye week, but the Ravens have a couple bad losses under their belt the past few weeks. So I'm sure they're getting right this week. I'm sure they're going to try and come out, get their offense flowing. They were throwing the ball a lot last week. Yeah, maybe that's because they were down, but they were still throwing the ball a lot. They were throwing the ball early at the beginning of the game. And the Bears' defense is bad, especially their secondary. It's not very good. They have Jalen Johnson, and I think Eddie Jackson is still playing safety there, if I'm not mistaken. So go ahead and start Rashad Bateman and Hollywood Brown this week. They're good starts. Yeah, the Bears suck.
My first stardom wide receiver this week, it is Brandon Cooks going up against the Tennessee Titans. I know that this game could potentially be a very lopsided game against the Houston Texans, but sometimes that is good for fantasy football purposes, especially in the 4th quarter. Brandon Cooks, not last week, they had a bye week the week before. He didn't do very good in terms of fantasy. He only had about 8-9 points. That was the first week that Tyrod was back. They lost to Miami. They only scored 9 points. But on the bright side, Brandon Cooks did have 13 targets when Tyrod Taylor comes back. Now he's going up against the Tennessee Titans defense that is pretty bad against the pass. And not only that, him and Tyrod have a pretty good connection. I can see he's definitely Tyrod's number 1 option. He's definitely the number 1 option on this Houston Texans team. He's definitely the best player on this Houston Texans team. If he gets a ton of targets, I can't see him having a bad day. Even 9 fantasy points last week, that's not a horrible day. It's not going to lose you a week. Going up against Tennessee, if they get blown out, Brandon Cooks could have a solid 4th quarter. Either way, he's going to be force-fed against a team that isn't very good against the pass.
Yeah, which leads me to my second and final stardom wide receiver of the week. We got Jalen Waddle traveling to the New York Jets. Jalen Waddle's lowest target share this season is 4, which really isn't bad for a rookie wide receiver, seeing 4 targets in a game versus, the Colts, who have a pretty good pass defense. And this is the first time playing the Jets this year. So we'll see how that goes for the Dolphins. But like Ryan said earlier in the video, Tua's back. They have a good connection. Last week when Tua came in, Jalen Waddle finished with 6 targets, about 60, 70 yards receiving. He's got games where he gets over 10 targets, which is pretty good for a fantasy wide receiver, especially in a PPR league. Jalen Waddle and Tua have really been developing a strong connection over the past, whether you watch the Dolphins or whether you have them guys in fantasy, they connect a lot. So, I mean, as long as Tua's the starter, I would probably consistently start Jalen Waddle, who is a receiver one, who torched Marlon Humphrey last week and who has shown ability to be a top receiver in fantasy football. So, start Jalen Waddle if you have him this week, and if so, he's only rostered in 90% of leagues, so if he's somehow still available, go ahead and pick him up and start him.
My next start on wide receiver this week, it is Hunter Renfro going up at home against the Cincinnati Bengals. Hunter Renfro has been the definition of consistency. He's seen double-digit fantasy points in all but 1 week. Hunter Renfro has been 7 catches the last 3 games, 17 points fantasy the last 2 games. Hunter Renfro has been solid. In my opinion, you can start him until the wheels fall off, and I don't see that happening, considering he is the only trusted pass catcher on this team. Him and Derek Carr have a great relationship, and I see him keep doing solid things against Cincinnati. I know Cincinnati is they're a decent team. Their defense is solid. And I know that they just got destroyed by the Kansas City Chiefs, but the over-under for this game is pretty high, so that you got that working for you. And like I said, he's Derek Carr, who is the top 5 passer in terms of yards this season. He is his top target. So until that, goes away, Hunter Renfro is a solid start. Double-digit fantasy points in all but 1 game. He is safe. Start Hunter Renfro.
Which leads us to our sit-ems now. I had 2 sit-em wide receivers this week. Did you have 2?
Yeah.
My first one is Brandon Ayuk. I know we were just talking about picking up on the waivers, maybe even earlier this week or last week. But the fact of the matter is, Brandon Ayuk is the 3rd option on this team. Unfortunately, maybe even 4th if they're running the ball. Deebo Samuel's getting carries. Deebo Samuel was in at running back a couple plays I saw when we were watching it on the TV, recording our waiver wire pickup video. Link in the description, by the way. Be sure to check it out, see if any of those guys are still out there. We also talked about trades for fantasy football with the trade deadline coming up, so check it out. You don't want to miss it. But yeah, Brandon Ayuk, he's the 3rd option. Kittle was back. Kittle got a lot of targets last week. Brandon Ayuk, he had I guess his breakout game 2 weeks ago, but he came back down to earth when George Kittle came back off IR, when Deebo Samuel got going against the Rams. And it seems like that the 49ers really want to get back to their roots on running the ball and pounding the rock. Kyle Shanahan said in a post-game interview that there's something along the lines if he wants to run the ball 40 times a game. Probably wasn't literal, but with the way his offense goes, you never really know. And they're playing a Jaguars defense who, I don't know. How do you feel about it? No, I'm not even going to ask. The Jaguars defense is okay. They're more on the bad side, but they're okay. They did pretty good against the Colts last week. But I'm sitting Brandon Ayuk. He'd probably go ahead and drop him again if you picked him up off waivers. It's unfortunate, but the fact of the matter is he's the 3rd option, maybe even 4th, and he's not going to get a lot of love from Jimmy Garoppolo, from Trey Lance, whoever the quarterback is.
My first sit-em wide receiver this week, it is Terry McLaurin, traveling to Carolina to take on the Panthers. The Panthers have a pretty solid defense, and Terry McLaurin hasn't been good at all this year. He's had 3 solid games, and I know that Terry McLaurin is a great name. I know that he is he was a top pick in fantasy football, and you feel inclined to start him. But at this point in the season, it's week 11. Don't feel inclined to start him no more. It was a bust. It was a waste. He's a Washington football team. And when you're in Washington, you suck. It's that simple. When you're a Jet, you suck.
When you're a Lion,
you suck.
When
It's
you're a
just
Cowboy,
what
you
happens.
suck.
It's just what happens, unfortunately. So, that's kind of what you get for taking a player on a bad team. It's kind of given to you. It's kind of what happens. So, try to trade him if you want. Obviously, I've bashed Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin for a few weeks now. Or you can hold on to them. See if they turn things around. Good luck.
It's like Elon Musk when he went on SNL and he was supposed to endorse the Dogecoin, and he did, and then it shit the bed. That's how it is listening to you talk about fantasy. It's like you bash these guys, and it's just, ooh. My second sit-em wide receiver after I'm done shitting on Ryan. Elijah Moore. This is a tough one. I know he's been doing good. He's got, I think, 3 or 4 touchdowns in the past 2 weeks. But the fact of the matter is, Joe Flacco's the quarterback. They're playing against the Dolphins defense, who was very good last week, against the Ravens, who are a lot better than the Jets. So in theory, you got to sit Elijah Moore, because any team with Joe Flacco at the quarterback, it's not safe to start any wide receiver. So for that fact alone, sit Elijah Moore this week. Don't pick him up off the waiver claim. Don't pick him up from free agency. Don't do it. Sit Elijah Moore this week. Yeah, like I said last week, he may catch a touchdown in garbage time like he did last week against Buffalo. But yeah, it's not worth it. Go ahead. Don't even waste. Don't even gamble and start Elijah Moore this week.
My next sit on wide receiver is Mike Williams, going up against Pittsburgh, going up against whoever he goes against, because Mike Williams, he is not Mike Williams. The first 3 weeks, he was absolutely solid, and the fantasy experts that said draft Mike Williams late were really happy about themselves, and they thought they were, top dogs. Turns out Mike Williams came back down to earth. He is averaging about 5 points if you take away those big games, he's averaging about 5 points. Mike Williams isn't very good. You are relying on a big game. You are relying on a touchdown, and I would not do that against a Pittsburgh defense. This game doesn't scream high points to me. So yeah, sit Mike Williams until, I don't know.
Ever.
Yeah, sit him.
Yeah, them guys are no greatest podcast on turf, if you ask me. But did you have any sit-em tight ends or start? For my start-em tight end, real quick, I had Pat Freiermuth. The Chargers gave up 2 touchdowns to Tyler Conklin last week, which says enough. The Chargers defense is terrible, especially in the red zone, especially against tight ends. They've been bad against tight ends all year. So start Pat Freiermuth, pick him up off waivers if he's still available. And speaking of Tyler Conklin, you're sitting him this week going against the Packers. Packers haven't given up a touchdown in fantasy to a tight end since week 2, I think. Yeah, I think they're giving up. I think the past 4 or 5 games they've given up like about 50 yards to tight ends, but that's not saying much. 50 yards, what's that, 5 points? That's nothing for a tight end. You're relying on a touchdown, and the Packers haven't given up a tight end touchdown since week 2. So I'm going off that. I think the Vikings suck, and like Brian said earlier, I think the Vikings are going to get bitched around this week. And with that being said, I think that's going to wrap up our Stardom Sit-em video. Click the link in the description. Check out our TikTok page, podcast. Check out all of our content. Follow us on Instagram. We are doing the giveaway on Instagram this time. Keep showing us love, and we'll see you guys tomorrow for our best bets. See ya.